What we are building, episode by episode, with specific documents and specific sources and specific unanswered questions, is a case that the official account is incomplete. That specific people have made specific decisions that have never been fully explained.
Is that American 11 trying to call?
Buddy, we have some planes. Just stay quiet and you'll be okay. We're turning to the airport.
15 Southwest of Bono going to Hampton.
Before we begin, I want to tell you who I am and why I'm doing this. Because on a subject like September 11th, the 9/11 attacks, a subject this serious, this contested, and this unresolved, you have a right to know exactly who is talking to you and what they are bringing to the table. My name is Charles Denyer. I've spent decades at the intersection of politics, national security, and power in this country. Not as a journalist covering it from the outside, not as an academic studying it from a distance, but as someone who has been in the rooms, the private dinners, the one-on-one conversations, the off-the-record exchanges that never appear in any newspaper and never find their way into any official record. I have known and spent serious time with almost every vice president of the United States since Walter Mondale. Men who stood one heartbeat from the most powerful office in the world. Men who sat in the most classified briefings this government conducts. And men who made decisions, some of them decisions the public still does not fully understand, that shaped the country we live in today. One of those men was Dick Cheney. I've spent hundreds of hours in private one-on-one conversations with Dick Cheney over the course of our relationship. Not briefings, not handshakes at public events. Hundreds of hours of private, direct conversations. The kind of talk that does not happen in front of cameras and does not get summarized in press releases. Dick Cheney is one of the most consequential political figures in modern American history, our nation's most powerful vice president ever, and he is one of the central figures in the story this series tells. I knew him well. I have listened to him at length, and I'm telling you that because it matters in how you understand what I'm about to say across 15 episodes. I've also known directors of the CIA, directors of national intelligence, secretaries of defense, secretaries of state, national security advisors, and members of the congressional intelligence committees, going all the way back to President Richard Nixon's administration. I've had private conversations with men and women who have held some of the most sensitive positions in American government, people who knew where the bodies were buried, in some cases, literally, but people who understand from the inside the gap between what the public is told and what actually happens in the institutions that govern this country's national security. Here is what all of those relationships and all of those probably thousands of hours of private conversations have taught me. The official version of events is almost never the complete version. Not because everyone in government is lying, not at all. In fact, really all the people I have known in these positions are serious, dedicated, and genuinely motivated by a desire to serve their country. But the system itself they serve has its own logic, its own institutional interests, and its own very powerful mechanisms for managing what becomes public and what does not. The gap between the official account and the full truth is not the exception in American national security. It is the rule. And September 11th, 2001 is where that gap is widest. And it is where the consequences of that gap have been most devastating. For the 3,000 people who died that morning, for the hundreds of thousands who died in the wars that followed, for the country that was permanently changed by both the attacks and the responses to them, and for the families of the victims who have spent more than 2 decades being told that their questions have been answered when the documented record makes clear they have not been. I'm doing this series because I have sat across the table from people who are inside the events for which this series examines. Because I've heard things in private that have never been said in public. Because the relationships I have built over a career at the center of American power have given me a perspective on 9/11 and its aftermath that I believe the public deserves to hear assembled in one place with the documentary evidence laid out clearly enough that you can evaluate it for yourself. And because frankly, I've waited long enough. The country has waited long enough. This is not a conspiracy series. Not at all. We are not going to tell you that the government staged the attacks or that the official story is fiction from beginning to end. That's crazy talk. What we are going to do is considerably more uncomfortable than that. Why? Well, because a conspiracy theory lets you dismiss the whole damn thing. What we are building, episode by episode, with specific documents and specific sources and specific unanswered questions, is a case that the official account is incomplete. That specific people have made specific decisions that have never been fully explained. And that specific evidence was never examined, specific witnesses were never called, and specific questions were answered with classified redactions that served institutional interest rather than the public's right to know. I have known a fair number of the people in this story personally. I have sat with the Vice President of the United States who was in the bunker on 9/11 and whose actions that morning remained consequential. I have known officials who were inside the intel community before the attacks, during them, and in the years of response that followed. What I know from these relationships, and what the documented public record confirms, is that the American people have never received the full accounting they were promised and that they deserve. That accounting is what the series is built to provide. 15 episodes, the intelligence failures, the commission's compromises, the Saudi and Pakistani connections, the wars that were built on manufactured intelligence, the torture program, the surveillance state, the first responders who were lied to and are still dying, the physical evidence that was removed before it could be examined, the blueprint that existed well before the planes hit, and the closing question that all of it demands: what does a democracy owe the truth about the most consequential event in its modern history? It owes everything. This is Threat Level Red. I'm Charles Denyer. Let's begin.
Threat Level Red is a Charles Denyer Productions podcast. For more information, visit charlesdenyer.com to learn more about current and upcoming podcasts and episodes, current and future book publications, professional services offered by Charles, and much more. All opinions expressed are those of the host and do not reflect the official positions of any government agency, military branch, or national security organization.